So I was on YouTube today and this video got my attention and it got me thinking about discipline.
Weekends are for high testosterone and cool cars. But Monday to Friday, I have a miserable, pretty much brand new Corolla. This year, I'm just kind of focused on just doing jiu-jitsu, waking up and deciding what car I want to drive. Like, I just have a routine, and this Corolla is like part of that routine. I just wake up, I know that I'm gonna have breakfast, get in my shitty Corolla, drive to training.
Hello. Hi, welcome back to another installment of Sika Psychology. Recently, we seem to be getting a new kind of life hack, a new key for all your success, a new thing that will set you apart from all others, whether it be in business and training, in life in general, right? And that new key seems to be discipline.
Well, I think the one thing that discipline definitely does help you with is it helps you get things done.
Discipline is your best friend. It will take care of you like nothing else can.
Yeah.
Running sucks for everyone. So it's like just to be able to get out there and get in a groove, that's discipline.
Yep.
And I've used that discipline for the rest of my life.
No matter where we go, no matter who we listen to, no matter what platform we're on, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, discipline seems to be what everybody's pushing. It's the new drug. It's the new avenue to success. But in many cases, and you'll see this popping up time after time again in the Sika Psychology series, discipline is oftentimes being misrepresented as being something else.
You might be somewhere where it's too fucking hot, so you might have sore leg, sore back, sore shoulder.
Motivation's crap. When you're driven, whatever's in front of you will get destroyed. Before I knew it, I started realizing the brain is starting to get hard.
So you'll see numerous examples in the videos we've just shown of discipline being a multifactorial thing. There's many different components to discipline. Discipline is something which you innately have within you, but also can be trained. And this is where the issues come. So for a lot of people, we recognize discipline is an issue, or discipline might be an area we might want to improve. And today we're going to talk a small bit about the kind of background of discipline, how you might want to start kind of addressing your own self-discipline. And we'll talk about some things you can do to actually make meaningful improvements in how good your self-discipline is. So self-discipline is really what we're talking about in almost all of these cases. So whether we're talking about training better, getting up in the morning earlier, whether we're talking about getting more work done, being more productive, being more focused, and having better concentration, in almost all cases we're referring to self-discipline. To put it very simply, is the control gained by obedience or order. So that's not necessarily what we want. That's like training a Labrador or training a German Shepherd. What we want is something a bit more agile, a bit more useful for us, and not necessarily needing a full list or a full remit of things to which we must comply, to which we must be obedient. And so we want the self-discipline or the area of self-discipline to be looked into a bit more.
But that is just the beginning. And I always say that discipline is the root of all good qualities, but you have to absolutely apply it to things outside of just waking up early.
And then when we look into self-discipline can be described as or thought of as the control of one's immediate desires. So the ability to delay gratification, the ability to off-put the desires we have currently, the ability to set goals and go after those goals. This is really what we're looking at when we're looking at discipline. And if we want to be correct, this is self-discipline. So when you're acting as an adult or acting as an athlete or acting as an employee and you want to be more disciplined in your particular endeavors, self-discipline is what you're talking about. Now, it's important to note also that discipline isn't just about you controlling your desires or you not eating that slice of cake or you getting up at 5 a.m. instead of getting up at 10 a.m. Discipline comes in many forms, and particularly for the athlete, discipline comes in many forms. So we have physical discipline, the ability to maintain certain bodily positions, the ability to maintain certain levels of physical output. That's all revolving or all encompassed by discipline. So if we have somebody whose deadlift form goes to shit when they're 10 reps in, that is a breakdown in discipline. Now, that's coming from a physical deficit or a cognitive deficit. Possibly they're not concentrating for long enough and their neurology is leaving them down there slightly. But that is an element of discipline. We're looking to abide by a certain structure and stick to it and use that framework then to get a better result in the end. Also, if you look at an athlete, if we take rugby as an example, as we always do, if you see athletes giving away penalties later on in the game, that is a breakdown in discipline. We'll often hear coaches talking about a team having good discipline or a team having bad discipline. The penalty count or the fault count being used as a kind of measure of that. That's all to do with discipline. And what we oftentimes see as a kind of good tracker that goes along with that is relative fatigue. So whether that be physical fatigue, cognitive fatigue, whatever it is, when we're more fatigued, it's more difficult to make better decisions and then to have better discipline because of that. So it's very important. Discipline isn't just about you and your own particular CPU or your own particular cognitive elements as you're making decisions as you go through every day. Our physical prowess and our physical state of well-being has a massive influence on discipline. So we talked earlier about ways you can improve your discipline. And two outstanding cases of people with incredibly strong discipline are David Goggins and my own personal favourite, Mikko Salo. So I'm sure everybody here probably knows of Goggins, or a lot of you will have. Many of you may not know who Mikko Salo is. And Mikko Salo is an unsung hero in myself and Owen's land of Sika Strength. He is a Finnish CrossFitter. He competed many, many years ago and has kind of hung up his CrossFit boots, as they say. We're going to have a look at some clips of Mikko now, and you'll see his discipline, you'll see his grit and his resilience, and you'll see what a hard bastard he really is.
Let's say like during the run in 2009, did you ever want to quit?
No. That's not an option for me. I'll never quit when I'm doing workout. My pace might get slower, but never quit. I'll do it anyway. And I'm always giving all out effort when I'm doing head course or in a competition. It's not an option for me to quit.
Does working out actually feel good, or do you feel discomfort when you're doing it? Like when you're breathing heavy?
I actually feel pretty good at the moment when I'm in the discomfort zone. I like it. I like it a lot.
You like the discomfort?
Yeah, I like it. I might be crazy man, but I like it. It's the nicest part in CrossFit. And here are the stuff. This is my inner rower, which actually in this morning I did my workout. 5k row and Tabata interval. And here are the antiques. So I can assure you, when you are doing a hard workout here with the rower, it's a question of mentality, because you can only see the wall. It's pretty tough.
So Mikko was made famous for never lying down on the ground after a workout. This was his kind of hallmark in the early days of CrossFit, when the fire breathers, as they used to call themselves, were going hard. They'd lie on the ground after a workout. They'd really be breathing heavy, and Mikko would stand there, or he might lean over or lean against the fence, but he'd never lie down. And this was a classic case of discipline. He had a rule in his head, a form of conduct that he said he would stick to, and Mikko said that when an animal is dying, the last thing it does is it lies on its back. In Mikko's case, he said he will never be the dying animal. He will never allow himself to deviate from that form of conduct, and he will be obedient within the form of conduct he has made, and so he stays upright the entire time when he is tired. This is a phenomenal piece of mental resilience, phenomenal piece of discipline. He doesn't allow himself to go there. Another classic case of discipline is what you've just seen in that video. Mikko does a massive amount of rowing work every week. I'm pretty sure he won that rowing machine, having won the CrossFit Games the year previously, and it's in a storage container full of antique furniture. He doesn't use music when he works out. I was trying to find that clip today earlier when I was going over the writing of this video. Mikko famously said that if you need music to work out, you're in the wrong sport. So the sport of CrossFit is basically just a a sport of working out. Whoever can work out more and accumulate more volume in those workouts is probably going to have a better engine and will probably do better in the long run. So if you're someone like Miko and you can go into a storage container where you're surrounded by pieces of furniture and you sit on your Concept 2 for hours and hours every week and do your rowing, you can see that person has a high level of self-discipline. So what should we look for in ourselves if we want to become more disciplined? So discipline, as I've mentioned, is kind of multi-component. So it's not necessarily something like motivation or concentration or goal setting or ability to achieve goals, but discipline tends to be a combination of multiple things. To bring in a small bit of pop culture or cultural awareness to this, said there's no better area to go to than the finance world when you want to get finance bros and see what they do to moderate their self-discipline or improve their self-discipline. And I found a pretty funny article, an article that might be somewhat misguided, but we'll have a look through it. So I think there's some value to be gained from it. So this is called 9 Powerful Ways to Cultivate Extreme Self-Discipline. Nice hyperbolic title there. This is by Brent Gleeson. Brent Gleeson is a former Navy SEAL, and the name of his company stands out for me as one of the most extreme names you could ever possibly name a company. So the company is called Taking Point, all one word, capitalized T, capitalized P, and they do kind of leadership courses. These leadership courses, for me as a sports psychology person or a performance psychology person, having worked in the industry, is the equivalent of like the business coach who goes around telling people how to run their business, but the business is telling people how to run a business, and it kind of confuses me a bit. But anyway, he lists off some things that you'd want to do to cultivate self-discipline or make yourself more disciplined. We're going to go through the list. We're going to talk about why it might be a good thing or it might be a bad thing. And then at the end, we'll talk about what I would do if you were one of my athletes or just somebody looking for some advice and wanting to be more self-disciplined. So the first one is knowing your strengths and weaknesses. There's nothing really to say about that. Knowing your strengths and weaknesses is a kind of fundamental thing of self-awareness. If we were to look at any of the psychological constructs, whether it be self-discipline, self-talk, any of these things, knowing where you're strong and knowing where you're weak is important. We talk about auditing your training all the time. This is very, very similar aspect to this. Number 2 is removing temptations. And to be honest, this is kind of where a lot of the popular media outputs on discipline and self-discipline fall down massively. So a classic example of this would be going to bed or your sleep hygiene or your sleep routines. A lot of the time when people talk about building self-discipline, becoming more disciplined, they talk about needing to go to bed earlier and getting up earlier in the morning, and then you just remove the temptations. So the temptations in this case would be some sort of enjoyable activity before bed, whether that's reading, playing video games, watching TV, whatever it is, and going to bed late. They would just say remove those temptations. The other temptation might be the phone, being on the screen of your phone as you go later on into the evening. Now, that's great advice, but that's like telling a person to be less fat by just being less fat. You don't kind of go into any of the details on how you might want to remove temptation. The saying that's quoted in this is out of sight and out of mind, but that's really of no use because temptations, even when removed, are tempting by their very nature. So this is where we'd get a classic breakdown, and this comes across many of the psychological aspects or performance psychology aspects, where you simply tell someone to do something, but you never tell someone how they're going to do it. Step 3, set clear goals and have an execution plan. Absolutely great. This is one of the ones we will definitely be talking about later. We'll talk about how to set goals and why you might want to do it and why it'd be beneficial for you. Practicing daily diligence. So I'm going to just quote a small bit from this because I think it's important. So diligence and practicing diligence is an aspect of self-discipline that oftentimes gets forgotten about. So diligence, making decisions, making sure we're being diligent with how we're carrying out the tasks you have is incredibly important. So setting out our tasks every day, making sure you're diligently going through those tasks is certainly an aspect that most people could benefit from. If we just take athletics, or if we just take training or physical training as an example of that, being diligent with the things you're doing outside of training and outside of the gym will allow you to become more disciplined as time goes on. And a good quote from this is, "We aren't born with self-discipline. It's a learned behavior. And just like any other skill you want to master, it requires daily practice and repetition." This is certainly something you have to look into. You have to look at, in the same way where you talked about discipline being having a construct or a framework and you follow that no matter what. This is the same thing. This is the following of the framework no matter what. Number 5 then is create new habit or rituals. This kind of falls into that framework thing, the diligence thing, making sure you have those structures in place. So to be honest, that will come into goal setting as we go a small bit later on with our recommendations. Then change your perceptions about willpower. This is a very interesting point. A SEAL candidate who believes they probably won't make it through training won't succeed. And so when we look at interventions that have actually been done with groups, interventions in student groups, found that doing some simple self-talk exercises where you get people to focus on the positive outcomes of carrying out a task, the negative outcomes of not having carried out the task, and allowing them to ruminate on that for quite a while will actually positively improve the outcome. So when you look at a large group of students, they got a 60% increase in the amount of practice sessions they do, so the amount of practice questions they do before a PSAT exam, when they allowed them to do these interventions. So the intervention was thinking about the positive outcomes, or thinking about the negative outcomes having not carried out the task, or a combination of both. And when we do that combination of both, that mixed combination of what's the positive outcome from this, combined with what's the negative outcome that could happen if I don't do this, you actually get a massive increase in how disciplined they are with their work, with the task they're being asked to do. Finally, then we have give yourself a backup plan. So autonomy is something that will regularly pop up over and over again in the performance psychology literature. Autonomy is particularly important when we look at kind of resilience and things like that. So positively reacting to a bad situation, having more autonomy tends to be a very, very good predictor of success in those cases. So if you have a player who's allowed control a small bit more of their own training, they're more likely to be more resilient when something negative happens to them. The penultimate piece then is getting good coaches and good mentors, absolutely. And the last piece is forgive yourself and move forward. As we all know, you should never forgive yourself if you're not being disciplined. Now getting into the kind of meat and potatoes of this. What can we do to be more disciplined? So to be more disciplined in our nutrition, to be more disciplined in our training, to be more disciplined in our work, right? Let's just break this up into 4 pieces very, very quickly. First one, self-control. So self-control is difficult to train. We talked about the training interventions we've seen in the literature and how they work. There's multiple ways you can train that self-control, but it's undoubtedly one of the things you need to be actively working on. Number 2 then is your motivation. We have a number of videos on the channel on the Sika Psychology playlist of motivation, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, things you might want to address if you're not motivated, things you might want to address for certain aspects of your motivation. Go and watch those if you want to improve your motivation or you want to be more consistent with your motivation. We won't get into it today, but it's definitely an aspect of being more disciplined. The other aspect to this as well is that a lot of people see discipline and motivation as this thing on a spectrum, right? So motivation and discipline both have the same outcome. If you're motivated to do something, you'll do it. If you're disciplined to do something, you'll do it. They're both positive in their outcome, but it's important that you work on your motivation as well. If you're very unmotivated, don't just think, oh, this is a storm, this will pass, my motivation will come back. There are things you can do to actively work on your motivation, and it's not just watching the Any Given Sunday speech before you go to training.
Life's this game of inches. We claw with our fingernails for that inch.
The next thing then is grit. So grit and resilience are commonly mixed up. We talked about resilience earlier on in the video. Grit basically can be described in very simple terms as the kind of piss and vinegar, hard-headed, getting after goals no matter what, right?
You might be somewhere where it's too fucking hot.
This is the breaking your arm and continuing to play on in the match. This is the getting knocked out, hopping up and fighting on for another multiple rounds in a fight, right? Grit is the steadfast pursuit of goal achievement no matter what. We talked about resilience being a positive coping mechanisms to negative events. Grit is just sheer and utter pursuit of goal achievement, no matter what. No matter what the outcome, all you're doing is grinding your head along the pavement and getting it done. Now, grit is really important. Grit is important in correct amounts though. So if we have an athlete, we can't have an athlete who is all grit and no resilience. That is bad. That's an athlete who will have a very, very short run career, or they will commonly fall out of training cycles due to poor decisions. They'll keep training when they're hurt. They'll overtrain. They'll go from overreaching to overtraining very, very quickly. So grit is important when we're looking at being more disciplined, but grit is only one element of that. Finally, then, the most important aspect of being disciplined is goals. So goals act as the signpost. A lot of the time we think goals are the kind of end glowing mirage at the end of a long road that you're going to wake up every morning, your eyes will open and you're saying, I'm going to squat 200 kilos and I'm going to open my eyes, I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m, I'm going to go for a run, then I'll go to the gym. That's not how we should view goals. We have multiple videos on goal setting, as we do as well for grit and resilience. If you're interested in grit versus resilience and that kind of that interplay, there is a video on the Sika Psychology playlist. Go and watch it. But when we're looking at goals and appropriate goal setting, this is our most valuable tool when we're looking to become more disciplined. So goals, I said earlier, act as these signposts along the road. We need to have incremental goal setting. We also need to understand that us going out and setting small goals and achieving them, setting small goals and achieving them is the most valuable thing we can possibly do to become more disciplined. So if we have one goal of squatting 200 kilos and getting your Sika Stand visa, then having 15 goals in terms of different rep maxes, different weights for singles, different weights for 5x5, different squat qualitative analysis pieces, they will be the thing that will drag you along. They will give you that perception of being disciplined. So someone will say, I've seen him and he's squatted every week, twice a week for the last 2 years. Look at how disciplined he is. In your head, that carrot that's hanging on the end of the rod just out of your grasp, that carrot only needs to be a millimeter out of your grasp. Don't put that carrot 2 years away. You need to have multiple carrots along the way, and you need to keep gradually catching up with them, achieving them, set another one out there, gradually catch up with it, achieve it, set another one out there. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Let me know your thoughts below. Let me know as well if there's other areas of performance psychology or sports psychology you'd like to hear about, and I'll see you soon.